Welcome to Assembly Unfiltered. I'm your host, Satchel, and co-founder of Assembly, the Learn to Earn platform. Assembly Unfiltered is a podcast about democracy, privacy, blockchain, politics, leadership, company culture, crypto, security, and startups. It's meant for anyone who believes that all of us are living in challenging, turbulent, and even exciting times. We're living in a moment ripe for dramatic change. We envision this as a podcast for our tribe, people who share an interest in how all these threads weave together for better communities. This is meant for our learners, voters, advertisers, civic organizations, tech geeks, developers, and employees. I hope you enjoy this episode of Assembly Unfiltered. All right, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to focus on tokenomics. And unlike many of the other episodes, which are more general, we're really going to be focusing about Assembly in the beginning, which is a learn-to-earn ad platform to describe sort of our approach to tokens. But this is really intended for anybody who's interested in understanding the dynamics and the underlying economics of tokens. So I want to start off with a couple of things of what you can learn from today's episode. We're going to talk about why we have two tokens for our ecosystem. What is the burn-mint equilibrium, which is the mechanism that we're rolling out, and why it's designed to help everyone in the ecosystem. Our approach to understanding our market and why it was a suitable one for creating value with the token. Why tokens, in our case, make sense to be appropriately regulated, and why tokens, if designed well, can be a good investment. So, answering the first question, well, why do we have two tokens? And so before answering, I want to pull back and look at the initial use case. Like, what is the problem that we want to solve? And so to understand that, we got to pull back and just ask, well, what is our product? What is it that we are building? And we're building an ad marketplace, which has two very different personas, which you're probably familiar with. There's a buy side and a sell side. But for us, it's the learner, which is the person who's viewing and consuming the ads. And then there is the buyer or the advertiser who wants to get in front of that audience, get engaged with them, and they're the ones that will pay for and create the ads in the format of our micro courses. So, for example, if you imagine that an advertiser is running a campaign against an initiative about selling, say, flavored tobacco to children, and the advertiser pays to reach the voters who are on our platform and creates a micro course as an initiative on the ballot. So in our case, as the learner completes the course and demonstrates an understanding, they receive rewards. So that's the basic mechanism in place. So let's take a look and drill down into what are the goals and what's our objective for each persona. So for the learner, we want to give them an experience where they're incentivized to learn by taking these short courses on our platform, these micro courses. And we're really starting right now on civic issues like ballot initiatives and referendums, or maybe very topical issues. But that's the approach. We want to incentivize them to want to return and learn through our micro courses. For advertisers, we actually have, we lump, for simplicity, advertisers, our growth partners, and people who invest in the token. We want them to care in the overall economic health of the overall platform. So for us, that's measured in advertising dollars that flows through the network. So we want them to invest and care in how it grows. So we want more advertising dollars. That increases as there are more viewers and as there's more engagement and as the value goes up. So that's sort of the simplified version. So what are the needs and goals for those personas? So for the learner, in order for them to come back and reliably go through the learning experience, we want to provide stability in the value of what they get for their time. And so specifically want to reward them, ensure them that they are moving forward as they score well on mini quizzes. And so in our case, we felt the rewards actually need to be tangible, something that can be exchanged in the near term to something valuable and that has sort of like pegged value, something that they can say, oh, this is actually valuable. And for us, it was gift cards. for everybody else, we want them to care about the value of the network, which meant if the network isn't growing as fast as or as much as it should be, then their value of the token holdings go down. And so that sort of sends a signal and perhaps an incentive to start to improve things. At the same time, if they do things and contribute to the network such that the value goes up, then the value of their tokens should go up. So that's sort of the difference. So to recap, the learners, it needs to be a stable, consistent, almost predictable value. For everybody else, it needs to be directly tied to how they contribute in their own ways to the network. So to implement this, it seemed like we needed two tokens. The token that was rewarded to learners needed to have fixed, stable value. But then the value-seeking token, which is for everybody else, needed to be a proxy for how well the ecosystem is doing. And so for this, it seemed like the burn-mint equilibrium really seemed to make sense as far as I understood it. Now, I was first introduced to it by reading an article on the Multi-Coin Capital website, and then later listening to one of the partners talk about this equilibrium in passing. And so here's my attempt at a simplified version of it. I'm not even sure I completely understand every nuance to it, but let's start with this pass. So the first one is the service token is the one that's rewarded to learners, and it's really an internal use token. It's all an internal system of how it gets generated and then how it gets redeemed, which is the gift cards within our platform. So we provide a service token, and it's called the Learn token, to learners, and they earn those whenever they complete their quizzes and score well on those quizzes to demonstrate an understanding, as well as, and this is important, when they provide first-party data about themselves, about their preferences through the registration and learning process. So there are incentives to earn this token when they take upon actions that we think are valuable to our network. And so for us, it's completing and showing they've understood the messaging from the microcourses, which are the paid ads, but also providing back to the platform valuable first-party data, which of course is encrypted and not sold or shared to anybody, but it's a good incentive to be very clear of the exchange for that data. So for us, the Learn token is fixed at a penny, 1 cent per token. So if somebody earns 2,500 tokens, the underlying value is $25, and they're able to redeem that within our network when they hit that threshold to redeem it for a gift card. So that's kind of it. It's very similar to points that you get on a credit card or flying on an airplane. So within this closed environment, how are they generated? So when advertisers say, we're going to pay for an ad, we're going to put in a budget, they have to purchase a minimum number of Learn tokens. They just buy them, and then those are then burned down or consumed as ads are viewed and completed. So those tokens, their value is then distributed to learners based on our decision. We sort of evaluate, okay, how many of a given token needs to be delivered. So let's take an example. Let's say it's 1 cent. We say it's 1 cent per token, and the average ad that we are delivering is we charge the advertiser a dollar. And for advertisers, not for the advertisers, but for learners to complete them, we realize, okay, they got to start to get about 10 tokens to complete it. So that's 10 cents. So the way we operate with this is that the money that's paid upfront to us and then subsequently burned down, when it's burned down, when that ad is completed, that dollar goes to our treasury. But a portion is set aside to effectively underwrite, say, the 10 tokens that are rewarded to the learner. So those tokens really do have redemption value because, of course, they're going to come back onto our platform and purchase the gift card, and we have to pay the gift card vendor the actual amount. So we have that set aside. So in order to bring those tokens to life to actually generate them, a vote token, the second token, needs to be burned. So the amount that is burned is determined by the dollar value of that vote token. And this vote token we call the value-seeking token. And that fluctuates in price. A fixed number of tokens are created on the blockchain at specific block-based intervals, and then there's a max supply, and that puts a cap on the total outstanding available number of tokens once that gets hit. And that max supply is sort of set out into the future, like 20 years or something. I don't remember what it was. So what that means is, in theory, as more learned tokens need to be generated, and that occurs when more advertisers spending more on running more ads or having more budget, then more vote tokens need to be burned. However, because at a point in time, the vote tokens will be limited, presumably as the demand for those vote tokens to be burned, because vote tokens need to be burned to generate learned tokens, then the value of vote tokens should go up. So let's take an example. So if the vote token is valued also at 1 cent a penny, just like the learned tokens, then if an advertiser, or all the advertisers, let's just use one advertiser on the entire platform, they spend $1,000 in ad spend. So they generate, or what gets generated in the system is 100,000 learned tokens, right? So it's a cent per token, and they're spending $1,000. Now, if at the time of the burn, the price is the same, the market value is the same, then 100,000 vote tokens would also need to be burned. And so if there was an abundance of supply of vote tokens, nobody was really spending in on ads, that would probably be like the floor price. That would be the price that it would kind of get burned at. However, imagine there's only 2,000 vote tokens available to burn based on the amount that we generate on this block time schedule, the max supply, perhaps there's a percentage of people that are staking it, whatever. So if all of those that were available were burned, the effective value of vote must be $5, not a penny, because there's 2,000 vote tokens to accommodate $1,000 in ad spend. And remember, one vote token must be burned to generate n number of learned tokens. So you can see how the value of the vote token goes up as more learned tokens need to be generated, which are related to spend, because it has to be burned down. So hopefully that explains. If there are questions, feel free to ask me. This was a very complicated thing for me, but once I pulled back and understand it, it was really a very elegant mechanism. So the decision to have two tokens, why do we think of the two tokens would work in this market? Because I don't know if it will always work. So part of it is we're rewarding these learned tokens which actually have cash value. Unlike many tokens that don't have any value in the beginning and you kind of hope that they bootstrap their way to value, that the tricky part for us was, well, how do we get value injected into the network? And for us, it effectively meant we had to share incoming revenue back to our learners, the people on our ad platform. And we do it through a gift card, but the gift card doesn't accept sort of imagined money. They require real dollars. And so there needed to be some way to do this. The ad network gave us enough gross margins so that if we needed to really dial change the dials to really bring on viewers and what we call them learners onto our network, we could change the take rate that's given to them to say you could get 60, 70, 80% maybe of the revenue that's coming in for the ad. And then as we see demand change and adjust, as people start to get used to this, then the thing starts to adjust appropriately. But they are reliably earning learned tokens which have backed cash value. So with this model in mind, I started to think about what's the regulatory environment. We know at some point crypto is going to undergo regulation, and I actually think that's not a bad idea if it's done sensibly and appropriately, because the value-seeking token should in some way be treated as an investment if it's done well. It's just there's a difference in regulation between transparency as its nature of regulation and sort of more heavy-handed bureaucracy. And I think that because of the blockchain and its immutability and transparency, if the regulations focus on everything that's traded as an investment has to have these, I don't know, call them 4 or 5 basic metrics that are viewable in real time based on the blockchain. That's really, really powerful versus the way a lot of investment or financial instruments are now, particularly say stocks. There's these complex income statements and balance sheets, and then you have these investor calls with a lot of coloring, and I could see it being very complicated to understand what is driving the value for some of these. But we have an algorithmic approach where we know the number of learned tokens that are being issued on the blockchain, so therefore people are aware of how much how much spend is going into the network, how much real revenue, and that's really pretty much what's driving. And then they know, well, how much vote tokens are being awarded. Is it being dilutive because we're awarding people to grow the network, but now that dilutes its value? Or is it being burned at a sufficient rate that's faster than how much that we're issuing? The issuance rate should start to be very predictable. So that should really give people a sense of a way to regulate this by requiring very simple metrics. So it's more of a input, what's coming in, what's going out, these flows, what are the stocks, to understand the value. Where is the value going? It also, however, is an opportunity for still speculators. So on one hand, if you put the speculation aside, it's just a very straightforward calculus of this is what something is worth. This is what, within the environment, if you were to have your vote tokens, let's say you're an owner, and it was to be redeemed by an advertiser wanting to spend on the network, then there's a reasonable expectation you would just sell it to them at that market price. That's effective spot price. But there might be speculators who have different time preferences, and they're like, well, I have a feeling that the market is actually going to get much bigger, that the revenue flow will significantly outpace what it is currently. So if they're actually savvy enough to understand the fundamentals, the unit economics of the growth and the costs and the pace of ad consumption and ad spend, then they actually should benefit from being a